Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Lower Decks Season 5 Episode 4, A Farewell to Farms. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Lower Decks, so I'll have to start with the spoiler warning for Lower Decks up to Season 5 Episode 4. If you have not seen up to this point, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So, this might be my favorite episode of the season thus far. Now, granted, thus far this season I think has been not bad. It's been good, but not great. It's been it's pretty good for pretty much most of the episodes so far. This one goes maybe still in the territory of pretty good, but maybe goes a little bit beyond, closer to being nah, it's pretty good. More like that, it's pretty good. That's my new rating system. Anyway, so we get the return of the Klingon. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce his name. Ma'ah or something like that. He's the one that was first introduced in Wej Duj all the way back in season 2. And we hadn't, because T'Lyn was the other one introduced in that episode. And we've seen a lot of T'Lyn. She's become like a recurring cast member, where this character we've barely seen. In fact, we went a couple years without seeing him. I think the first time we saw him again was at the end of season 4, where he appeared in the whole Nicholas Locarno storyline, and that's when, of course, he and Mariner bonded, and so they kind of play off of that again. So I think, to my recollection, this is only the second time where we don't get the intro, the typical Lower Decks intro with, them coming across all those enemy ships fighting each other and the little monster attached to the nacelle. To my recollection, the only other time they skipped this was in the Peanut Hamper episode. And in both cases, they have the perspective or the focus on a guest character, or a character who's not a part of the Cerritos crew, which is what they did in this episode. They focused on Ma'ah, or however you say his name, and his brother on a farm, and the Peanut Hamper episode, of course, focused on Peanut Hamper. And these are both characters who we've only seen. Well, Peanut Hamper, I believe we only saw once before. Or maybe it was two. No, I think it was just once before. Whereas Ma'ah, we've seen him a couple of times. But he's still not like a main character, not a recurring character. I think he's only been 3 episodes prior to this one. So, and we take his perspective, we see, and even when we are introduced to, our lower deckers, we still take his perspective. Although there's a side plot that focuses entirely on the Cerritos crew, but that's different. But I'll get to that side plot. So this is obviously a much better episode than the Peanut Hamper one, which was not a good episode at all. And so I appreciate this better. And the way they have the Lower Decks, symbol come up just over top of, the farm storyline, and we get a little montage of what Ma'ah's life is like on the farm, and that's when we get the opening credits sprinkled through that. I love that, and I love when they do different stylistic things like that. And as I said, this was a much better one than the Peanut Hamper one. So I do appreciate that. I do appreciate them doing something original and new, and I do like how Mariner's continually trying to contact him, and he's ignoring her and is stupid human or whatever, until finally she just shows up. It's hey, why aren't you returning my calls? That's pretty cool. And because even though the two of them bonded, he still has this kind of attitude of humans. And we get the moment that we saw in the trailer where that Klingon woman is sort of hitting on him and getting really close, but then Mariner shows up and she's like, what are you doing for fraternizing with this human? And just leaves. Now, there's a minor nitpick I have, and I can already foresee a whole bunch of people disagreeing with me on this and being like, you're wrong, Mark. But I kind of feel like they overplayed the Klingon sort of distaste for humans, because not only are they in a current alliance with the Federation, with Starfleet, but on top of that, they just fought a war together, like side by side, not that long ago, and worked side by side to conquer the real enemy, the Dominion. And so, I don't know. I don't really... Everyone seemed to have too much of humans, suck of puny humans, blah, blah, attitude. Now, I do, again, I can foresee tons of comments being like, you're wrong, Mark, whatever. But I do get that they see humans as the weaker, as they're too soft. I get that, and they can play off of that. I'm fine with that, no issue. But that woman was disgusted and be like, fuck you, you're talking to humans, that just seemed too much. And it wasn't just her, it was the way other Klingons sort of behaved. Now granted, we did get this return of I think it's the Klingon that we saw in episode 2 or episode 3 of the whole show. I don't know, it's been a while since I saw the earlier seasons, but the dude who was friends with Mariner, and he just so happened to be a member of this council. And he's friendly to Mariner, friendly to humans, and doesn't give a shit. So you could say, well, that's the counterbalance. But even so, I still think they overplayed the Klingons, because Ma'ah seemed like he was ashamed to be seen with humans. It's that's why he kept trying to push her away. It's people are gonna think less of me because I'm around with humans, and we see that in action when that woman rejects him because of it. So I don't know, that I think they overplayed that a little bit. I don't think Klingons are that disgusted by humans. But again, re-emphasize the word minor when I said minor nitpick, but I know everyone and their mother's still going to disagree with me on this, but that's fine. It's not that big of a deal for me, though, even so. But yeah, overall, I really like that storyline. And the interesting aspect of the whole council thing is that guy who's really upset that Ma'ah killed his brother, and he seems like he's very corrupt, and that's why Ma'ah doesn't even want to become a captain of the fleet anymore, because that guy is such a corrupt asshole. It kind of makes me realize that even though Martok became the chancellor and trying to weed out corruption in the Empire, is that there's still... And this makes sense, that there would still be hangovers from the corrupt Gowron time. Even prior to Gowron, it was a very corrupt. Gowron was just a sign, a symptom of how corrupt the Empire was. And it does make sense that there would still be some corruption remaining, that when Martok became chancellor, it wouldn't instantly purge the entire empire of corruption, that he would obviously work to purge the corruption, and would do so effectively in some cases, and maybe even most cases, but not entirely, that there would still be some corrupt. And it seems like that other dude who was friends with Mariners was more... he was more in line with the new Martok way of doing things, which is why he kind of worked to undermine the evil dude, or the corrupt dude, to call him, because he saw how corrupt he was, but he was still his superior, or I don't know, superior. I think superior because he was in charge of the council, so he still couldn't do anything directly about it. But he was like kind of working with Mariner and Ma'ah to kind of try to undermine him because he could see how corrupt he was. So I like that sort of political aspects of getting more into the guts of the Klingon Empire is very complex storytelling for a comedy animated show, which is when I think Lower Decks is at its best, when it can combine humor with great complex storytelling. And I think this whole episode was a great character story for a guest character we've barely seen, and I love that we actually get more of this character. I've always said I wanted to see more of this character, even though I do and still think that Wej Duj is a very overrated episode. I still like the characters that they introduced, Ma'ah and T'Lyn, and we got a lot of T'Lyn, and I love T'Lyn every time we see her, but we didn't get as much of this character, so I love that we went back and they did a whole episode focusing on him, and he deserves it way more than Peanut Hamper does. Like that Peanut Hamper episode, to be fair, it could have been a good episode, but the ending like completely ruined it. But even if it was a good episode, like, she's not as interesting of a character to hang a whole episode on as Ma'ah, or however you pronounce his name, is. So this is just much better in every way possible. And I love the Boimler part of this as well, and now he has a mustache. I wonder, it's going to be interesting how they keep progressing his facial hair as the season goes. But I thought that was how Boimler was like, oh, this is so Klingon, and he would get like hit with pain sticks and be in complete agonizing pain, and he'd still be like, oh, this is so Klingon, and he's like so excited by everything. Like, that was cool. I actually kind of like that. It's kind of more of a trait from Rutherford, though. Rutherford's typically the guy who gets excited about everything, but he gets more excited by like technical nerdy shit, and then Tendi gets excited by everything as well. So it seemed to be more of their traits, but I suppose Boimler does that from time to time too, and it was great seeing how he was up for anything, all these Klingon things, and willing to just risk his life, and he was like volunteering himself to die to be the sacrifice, because it's so Klingon. Like, that maybe is a little bit too reckless, but yeah, I liked Boimler's bit. I liked Mariner's bit in here as well, how she was more the reasonable one, which is an interesting sort of turn for her. But she still had that sort of carefree, risky attitude, but she was reasonable enough to realize that the whole sacrifice thing, maybe not do that. And it was great that they found the workaround, and obviously with the help of Mariner's friend and the other council member who didn't like Corrupt Guy, and were able to find a loophole that at first it was gonna allow Corrupt Guy to keep his position, but just to have Ma'ah be the captain. But he couldn't leave good enough alone, and tried to stab him in the back, which is very dishonorable, which gave Ma'ah the reason he needed to kill him. So, and then now Corrupt Guy is dead. Which is, and again, it's part of weeding out the corruption. So that was a very good storyline. I really liked it. Now, getting to the side plot, Doctor Migleemo, or however you say his name. I typically love this character. I like the actor who voices him, Paul F. Tompkins, I believe, because I recognize his voice from Mr. Peanut Butters on BoJack Horseman. Love that show, and I loved Migleemo. Even as a character himself, he's always hilarious. I didn't really like this side plot that much. I think focusing on him, I don't know, he wasn't the problem with the side plot, to be fair. This problem was the, stuck up characters, the food critics or whatever. I do love, there was aspects of the side plot I really liked. I loved the whole thing about how food is the basis of their entire society, and chefs or food critics were seen as the highest tier, they're their leaders, which I love, because the whole thing that when Migleemo was first introduced, it was introduced that he kept using food metaphors for everything, so that kind of makes sense, and I love that. But the whole thing with that, about them being oh, this tastes awful, this tastes disgusting, and wanting to arrest Migleemo for making something so disgusting. First they're oh, you did something, replicate it, and so they went out of their way to make the food themselves, and that was even worse. Arrest them. See, here's the thing, and this is why I don't like this side plot. Even though, there was parts of it I found more funny, but for one thing, the critics, or whatever they were called, the stuck-up aristocratic assholes, were so annoying. They weren't funny. They were just flat out, get off my screen, annoying. They're I just couldn't stand them. I was fuck these guys so hard. Just get them off my screen. And it's not in a funny way. So that's one aspect. But the main issue I had with it is that, it's combining both aspects that make it bad. But the main thing is that I knew where this was going. It was so obvious. When they were cooking him this nice meal, I'm they're gonna reject it and they're gonna think it's terrible, which is what happened. And I knew it was gonna end with some big revelation that will expose these critics for being, frauds or being assholes, and Migleemo's gonna have the final say. And that's exactly what happened. It was so predictable. It was so sheet by the number cliche. Now, granted, a lot of comedy can have a by the number cliche typical plot if they make it funny, if they make it engaging, if they have character aspects through it. But I don't think, again, that's why I'm saying it's the two things combined. If you're going to have a bland by the numbers cliche predictable plot, you need to have some really great character moments and some great humor in order to make it worthwhile, and they failed to do that. As much as I do love Migleemo, and I do think it's funny, and as I said, aspects of it I found funny, like their whole society being on food or whatever, but they didn't make the specifics about, the critics rejecting his food or whatever. They didn't make it funny. They didn't make it engaging. They didn't really develop Migleemo's character at all. He had that moment at the end where he proved himself, and how being a psychologist, they were thinking it was how dare you be a psychologist, but then it showed him at the end how it was being worthwhile. That's not good enough. That was kind of predictable that would happen, and so they didn't have any sort of character moments worthwhile, or it wasn't funny. It was just annoying. It was I would equate it to Peanut Hamper. How she's just very annoying and not very funny, and more get off my screen. That's how these characters were. As much as I love Migleemo, I didn't really think this was it didn't live up to the character. So unfortunately that side plot did bring the episode down a little bit. So anyway, my rating for A Farewell to Farms. Oh, by the way, Farewell to Farms is, of course, obviously a play off of the Hemingway novel Farewell to Arms. I do that again. I think that's funny wordplay. But anyway, my rating for A Farewell to Farms out of 10 is going to be an 8. Extremely good. Part of me wanted to give this a 9 because the more I talked about the Klingon plot, the more I appreciate it. I think it was very well structured. I love the focusing in a whole episode on a guest character who actually can hold in a whole episode himself, unlike Peanut Hamper, and is actually more interesting. And the way they folded Mariner and Boimler into the storyline was natural, really worked for the plot, really enjoyed it. But I can't give it a 9 because of the side plot. It does bring it down a little bit. It was cliche, it wasn't particularly funny, and had annoying get off my screen characters. But the A plot was still strong enough for an 8. Definitely. It's still almost there to a 9. If it wasn't for the side plot, it would have made it to a 9. But it's still definitely strong enough to give this episode an 8. Making it my favorite of the season so far. Because I believe I gave a 7 to all 3 previous episodes. So, but yeah, strong episode. Really did appreciate it. Now, one thing I did have to mention I forgot to talk about is the recurring theme of the season of the fissures, from interdimensional or different universe fissures. And it was pointed out to me by my sister in my previous review that was a theme that they were reoccurring this season, which I didn't realize that's why they had that tiny microscopic Starfleet ship in the previous episode. Seemed really pointless to me, but then I was like, it's this theme, and they made that clear in this episode because apparently Mariner's sort of hidden agenda of going to help Ma'ah had more to do with studying. They wanted to be able to study the fissures or whatever that was opening up. And again, it kind of seems inconsistent to me that the Klingons wouldn't just let them do that because they are in fact allies and on very good terms after the Dominion War, but whatever. They need to use that as an excuse to have an excuse for Mariner to come to the planet. But yeah, so that seems like that's going to be a recurring theme this season. Like last season, it was the disappearing ships, which led to the Nick Locarno thing. And it seems like this season they're doing the theme of the interdimensional fissures. So that's really interesting. And then we did get a revelation about it where it was artificially constructed. At least that's what it appears to be. So again, kind of teasing, very similar to season 4, what we were teasing at someone who was responsible for all that, which we found out was Nick Locarno. So I do wonder if they're going to make a revelation of it being some random character that appeared in Star Trek prior, that only appeared in one episode, who's not that well known, who's turned out to be responsible for all this. Like, I wouldn't doubt that. But yeah, so I am kind of interested to see where they're going, but also at the same time, it kind of seems like they're kind of just redoing what they did in season 4. But if they make it worthwhile, if they come up with something interesting finale or whatever, if it leads to something great, then I'm fine with them sort of repeating the same kind of theme. But anyway, so that is it for my review of A Farewell to Farms. I almost said A Farewell to Arms. So I'll be back next week to cover season 5, episode 5 of Lower Decks. In the meantime, I'm continuing to cover Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Star Trek The Next Generation, one episode at a time. So you can also check out my channel for that and many other shenanigans that I'm up to. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.